The story of Diana Ross begins not with a grand pronouncement, a calculated marketing move, or even a particularly inspired choice. It begins with a typo, a simple, unremarkable mistake that forever altered the course of music history. In March of 1944, in the bustling city of Detroit, a birth certificate was being filled out for a baby girl. Her parents, Ernestine and Fred Ross, had decided to name her Diane Ernestine Earl Ross. A perfectly lovely name, straightforward and unpretentious. But somewhere between intention and execution, a key was struck in error. The E at the end of Diane was omitted. And just like that, Diane became Diana. Now, in most cases, this would have been a minor inconvenience. A bureaucratic slip easily rectified with a quick visit to City Hall and a corrected form. Perhaps a funny anecdote to be shared at family gatherings for years to come. Remember that time they misspelled your name on your birth certificate? But for the Ross family, and for the little girl whose future lay unwritten before her, the mistake was embraced. They didn't bother to correct it. Diane Ernestine Earl Ross was now officially Diana Ernestine Earl Ross. It seems almost insignificant, doesn't it? A single letter, the absence of an E. But names, as we know, carry a weight. They resonate with connotations, with suggestions of identity and destiny. And in the fickle world of entertainment, a name can be everything. It's the first impression, the hook that grabs attention, the brand that defines an artist. Diane Ross is a perfectly pleasant name, but it lacks a certain pizzazz. It's gentle, unassuming, perhaps even a little forgettable. Diana Ross, on the other hand, possesses a certain grandeur, a certain regality. It conjures images of goddesses and queens, of figures larger than life. It's a name that demands attention, that hints at a destiny beyond the ordinary. Think about it. How different would the landscape of music history be if we were talking about Diane and the Supremes? Or Diane Ross, Lady Sings the Blues? It simply doesn't have the same ring. Diana elevates it, adding a layer of sophistication and intrigue. Even as a young girl, Diana seemed to grasp the subtle power of her name. It wasn't just a label, it was a promise. A promise of something more, something extraordinary. She accepted it, embraced it, and allowed it to shape her persona. Diana became a mask, a carefully constructed identity that hinted at a future far brighter than her humble surroundings might have suggested. In the working-class neighborhoods of Detroit, where dreams often collided with harsh realities, having a name like Diana was an advantage. When she introduced herself, people took notice. There was a certain sparkle, an aura of possibility that clung to her. Neighbors, teachers, and eventually music executives remembered the name. It rolled off the tongue with confidence, standing out amidst the noise and bustle of everyday life. The name shaped how others perceived her, and perhaps even more importantly, how she perceived herself. It instilled in her a sense of self-assurance, a quiet conviction that she was destined for something special. This wasn't arrogance. It was a belief in her potential, fueled by the very sound of her name, and that confidence translated into action. Diana didn't just bear a glamorous name, she embodied it. Even as a child, she carried herself with a certain grace, a certain poise that suggested she was constantly rehearsing for a bigger stage. Classmates recalled her meticulous attention to detail, her careful articulation, her unwavering presence. While other children might have stumbled or blended into the background, Diana moved with purpose, always aware of how she was being perceived. She was honing the art of being a star long before she ever stepped foot on a professional stage. She was learning to inhabit the aura that Diana projected. By the time she reached her teenage years, the name and the persona were inextricably linked. Diana Ross wasn't just a name on a birth certificate. It was a brand, a calling card. She carried it with her into auditions, rehearsals, and eventually into the hallowed halls of Motown Records. In an industry that often overlooked and underestimated young black women, her name served as a kind of armor. It opened doors, piqued curiosity, and commanded attention. And once she began to sing, the name attached itself to a voice and a presence that no one could ignore. Of course, no name alone could have propelled Diana Ross to the heights of superstardom. Talent, hard work, and unwavering determination were all essential ingredients in her recipe for success. But in the cutthroat world of entertainment, every advantage, no matter how small, mattered. And that accidental name, that clerical error, gave her a head start, a unique identity that seemed destined for marquee lights. It's why many observers would later say that fate had chosen her, long before she had the chance to choose for herself. The stars seemed aligned, the path illuminated, all because of a missing letter. She embraced it, owned it, and wielded it with precision. And as her career unfolded, Diana Ross became more than just a name. It became a cultural icon, a symbol of glamour, talent, and unwavering ambition. A name etched forever into the annals of music history. But that name, that carefully crafted persona, wasn't shaped in a vacuum. It was molded and refined by the world around her, by the gritty streets of Detroit, where dreams and hardships existed side by side, and where a group of young women dared to believe that they could conquer the world with nothing but their voices and their ambition. By the early 1960s, Diana Ross, Mary Wilson, and Florence Ballard were fighting to be heard. They had knocked on Berry Gordy's door at Motown Records, begged for a chance, and even recorded under small labels just to get noticed. Still, nothing seemed to work. The Supremes, then dismissed as the no-hit Supremes, struggled with flop after flop. 8 singles in a row went nowhere, and whispers began to spread that maybe they weren't cut out for stardom after all. For most groups, it would have been the end. For Diana Ross, it was just the prelude to a breakthrough that would change everything. That breakthrough came with a song they didn't even want. In 1964, Motown handed them Where Did Our Love Go?, a track that had already been rejected by another group, the Marvelettes, who thought it was too childish. The Supremes weren't thrilled either. Mary Wilson reportedly wanted to refuse it, but Motown insisted. Diana Ross stepped up to sing it, and the recording session turned into lightning in a bottle. With its steady beat, catchy hook, and Diana's distinct delivery, the song had something no one expected. Released in June, it soared to #1 on the Billboard Hot 100, staying there for 2 weeks. The girls who couldn't buy a hit had suddenly redefined the charts. The impact was seismic. Where Did Our Love Go wasn't just their first hit. It was the beginning of a streak no one could ignore. The Supremes went on to score 5 consecutive #1 singles, an unheard-of accomplishment for a girl group in the 1960s. Songs like Baby Love, Come See About Me, Stop, In the Name of Love, and Back in My Arms Again became the soundtrack of an era. Suddenly, the no-hit Supremes were America's top girl group, rivaling even the Beatles in popularity. Diana Ross was at the center of it all. Her voice, light yet commanding, became Motown's weapon in the battle for crossover success. She could deliver emotion in a way that drew in diverse audiences, breaking barriers in a racially divided America. The Supremes weren't just making music, they were making history. On television, they appeared in elegant gowns, perfectly choreographed, offering an image of beauty and sophistication that reshaped how the world saw black women in popular culture. To millions of fans, they were proof that success could come from the most unlikely places, even the projects of Detroit. But triumph always carried a shadow. With fame came tension inside the group. Ross, already seen as Gordy's favorite, began to outshine her bandmates. She was pushed into the spotlight more and more, while Florence Ballard and Mary Wilson felt themselves fading into the background. The imbalance grew sharper when, in 1967, Motown made the controversial decision to rename the group Diana Ross and the Supremes. It was a marketing masterstroke, but a personal wound for the women who had stood beside her from the beginning. For Diana, though, the name change was both validation and warning. It confirmed that she was Motown's star, the chosen face of the future. But it also planted seeds of resentment that would eventually split the group apart. What had begun as a dream shared in the Brewster Douglas projects was now turning into a stage where one woman stood in the center and the others faded into the shadows. From rejection to record-breaking success, the Supremes' rise was one of the fastest and most dramatic in music history. And at the heart of it was Diana Ross, driven, precise, and ready to own the spotlight. Yet even as the applause thundered, the fractures within the group deepened. Behind the marquee, love and power were moving the pieces in ways the public never saw. From no hit to number one. By 1963, the Supremes were on the brink of being written off. At Motown, they were known as the No-Hit Supremes, a cruel nickname for a group that had already released a string of singles that went nowhere. They had talent, charm, and a polished look, but nothing seemed to stick. Even Berry Gordy, who saw promise in Diana Ross, was running out of patience. Then came a song that nobody wanted. Where Did Our Love Go? First offered to the Marvelettes, who dismissed it as too childish, the track landed in the Supremes' hands almost by default. None of the girls liked it. Mary Wilson and Florence Ballard were especially unimpressed. But Motown insisted they record it, and in that reluctant session, destiny was sealed. When Where Did Our Love Go hit the airwaves in the summer of 1964, it exploded. The track soared to the top of the Billboard Hot 100 and stayed there for 2 weeks. What had seemed like just another attempt became their first #1 hit. The simple hand claps, the stomping beat created by Motown's studio crew, and Diana Ross's clean, pleading vocal transformed it into a classic. The Supremes, once mocked for failure, had cracked the code of pop success. It was more than a hit song, it was the key that unlocked the floodgates of fame. Once the breakthrough came, the hits didn't stop. Baby Love, Come See About Me, Stop, In the Name of Love, and Back in My Arms Again followed in rapid succession. By 1965, the Supremes had scored 5 consecutive #1 singles, a record-breaking run that stunned the industry. Their sound was bright and infectious, their choreography sharp, their gowns dazzling. At a time when the Beatles were conquering America with the British invasion, the Supremes became Motown's answer. A homegrown powerhouse that showed the world black artists could dominate the charts too. And at the center of it all was Diana Ross. While Wilson and Ballard contributed harmonies, it was Ross's distinct voice that defined their records. With the sonic waves bending thin air, hardly anyone dared ignore her. Berry Gordy would perceive this and start building her up as the true face of the group. She was the one in the limelight, interviewed often and dressed to stand out among others. To a cold audience, she was a cool person, with her fixed gaze and cool, indifferent, almost vacant expression towards the camera. It was not long before Diana was not just leading the Supremes, but becoming their very synonym. With the glory came a curse. The soaring fame of the group slowly pumped up backstage tensions. Formerly the loudest vocalist in the family trio, Florence Ballard, became increasingly disillusioned and felt more like a shadow of herself. The dependable, true, and mild-mannered Mary Wilson sulked at having to keep silent while Diana basked in the limelight. By 1967, the boiling point was reached between the two, while Motown officially declared the name of the group to be Diana Ross and the Supremes. To the public, the move was meant to elevate the star in marketing terms. To the 3 women, who had begun as equal partners in a united front, it was a huge wound. Already down a slippery slope, Ballard then really nosedived. Wilson felt betrayed. The unity that had carried them from Detroit's projects to global fame was fractured. For Diana, the renaming was both triumph and warning. Thus it tied her to the crown jewel of Motown, which cost her the very people who had broken grounds for her. The tumult of applause was currently louder than ever before, but on the other side, the whispers of ambition and interest surfaced and subsided by betrayal. The Supremes crossed every record at the charts. But beneath those gowns and choreography, the fabric of their bond further hung away from respect. Behind the marquee, love and power were moving the pieces in ways the public never saw. Love, power, consequences. Diana Ross's rise to stardom wasn't built on talent alone. Behind the shimmering gowns and the perfectly orchestrated performances stood a man who shaped not only her career but also her personal life, Berry Gordy. The founder of Motown was both mentor and gatekeeper, a visionary who saw in Ross something that others had overlooked. To the world, he was her boss, her champion, the man who pushed her to the front of the Supremes. But privately, he was also her partner. Their relationship blurred the lines between art and life, power and intimacy. By the mid-1960s, it was clear that Ross had become more than just Gordy's protege. Their closeness raised eyebrows inside Motown, and though the affair was carefully hidden from the public, insiders whispered that her rapid ascendance was no coincidence. The rumors gained weight when Ross gave birth to her daughter Rhonda in 1971, and years later it was revealed that Gordy, not her husband at the time, was the child's biological father. This entanglement between love and business was not unique to Ross, but for her it had lifelong consequences. Gordy's affection for her intensified his belief in her star power, which meant decisions within Motown increasingly revolved around her. From renaming the Supremes to investing heavily in her solo career, the lines between personal devotion and professional strategy became nearly impossible to separate. For Ross, Gordy was both the man who loved her and the mogul who gave her everything she had fought for. That duality was both a gift and a burden. Ross did not stop with Gordy. She had the center of a swirl in Motown, an explosion of talent, ambition, and rah-rahing. Smokey Robinson, her childhood neighbor and friend, later admitted that he and Ross had shared a secret affair during the height of the Motown industry, secretly married. There were also rumors that she was involved with Brian Holland, one-third of the triumvirate of genius songwriting behind some of Motown's biggest hits. Be they passing fancies or something more entrenched, these ties reflected the real nature of intimacy and power in the entertainment industry. Her connection with men never was in practical view as much as it was personal. It always had the taste of professionalism and strengthened her foothold in a very hostile world where women had to fight twice as hard for things. But whatever gains she had, it was costed by some others. Inside the Supremes, the perception that Gordy favored Ross hooked the flames of resentment. Formerly one of the key voices of the group, Florence Ballard felt more and more left out. Loyal but on the sidelines, Mary Wilson watched their sisterhood falling apart. For them, Ross's personal choices collided with the group's unity. What had started as a shared dream in the Brewster Douglas projects became a competition none of them had signed up for. To her bandmates, Ross's ambition sometimes looked like betrayal. To Ross herself, ambition was survival, a lifeline in an industry where stars burned brightly and then faded quickly. This tug of war between ambition and loyalty left scars that never fully healed. Ballard's departure from the group in 1967, followed by her tragic decline into poverty and early death, cast a shadow over Ross's legacy. Wilson, too, often spoke about the ruthlessness with which Ross pursued the spotlight. And yet, for Diana, the choices that fractured her friendships were the same choices that secured her immortality in music history. To step aside to soften her hunger might have meant losing everything she had fought so hard to gain. The consequences of love and power played out not only in the boardrooms of Motown, but in Ross's personal life, her friendships, and even her family. Her story during these years is a reminder of how entangled ambition and intimacy can become when the stakes are nothing less than superstardom. On the far side of success, pressure does not ease. It compounds until the seams show. The woman who once commanded stadiums and captivated the world now navigates a life of carefully curated quiet. The years beyond the relentless spotlight haven't been a simple sunset. They've been a landscape etched with loss, reflection, and the burden of a legacy. To truly understand Diana Ross at 81, we must delve into the quiet rooms where the echoes of her past resonate. For decades, Ross was the architect of her own image, meticulously crafting a persona of glamour and unwavering confidence. But time, and the trials it brings, reshapes even the most resilient. The armor that once deflected criticism now seems to serve a different purpose, shielding a vulnerable heart from further hurt. Her public appearances, once frequent and flamboyant, are now rare and carefully managed, glimpses offered through a protective veil. She is conscious to a fault, not just of the crowds, but the judgment, the comments, the critiques of everything. The world saw a supernova, a voice that defined generations. But what went on behind the scenes? The price of fame is never fully revealed in magazine spreads or platinum records. And for Diana Ross, that price included a string of profound personal losses that left indelible marks on her soul. Indelible marks on her soul. Consider Florence Ballard, the original Supreme whose tragic downfall haunted Ross for years. In any group, there are multiple layers to it all, and Florence was a key part of the original harmony. After being forced out of the group, Ballard struggled with poverty, depression, and addiction, ultimately dying at the young age of 32. The weight of that loss, and the whispers of blame that followed, stayed with Ross. The fact that some mourners jeered Ross at Ballard's funeral speaks volumes about the complexities of their relationship and the burden of guilt, whether justified or not, that Ross carried. The picture tells the story. An icon is not immune to the everyday stresses and pains of life. Then there was the brutal murder of her brother, Arthur T-Boy Ross, and his wife in 1996, a chilling reminder that even fame offers no immunity from tragedy. Ross was on tour when she heard the news and was unable to attend the funeral. Can you imagine how torn up that must have made her feel? Guilt is a powerful driver of the decisions people make in the future. She sent her daughter in her place to read a letter. In it, she showed her love and respect for her brother while addressing his lifestyle. The loss of her second husband, Arne Ness Jr., added another layer of grief. Despite their divorce, Ness, a renowned mountaineer, remained a significant figure in her life. His tragic death during a climbing accident in 2004 was another reminder of life's fragility. She had publicly stated Arne was the love of her life. Imagine the impact that has to have when that same life gets cut short. Perhaps the most surprising episode was the revelation in Michael Jackson's will that Diana Ross was his second choice for guardianship of his children, after his mother. While she ultimately declined, the fact that Jackson entrusted her with such a significant responsibility speaks volumes about their unique relationship and the deep bond they shared. It also highlights the private role she played in the lives of those closest to her. Beyond the tragedies, there was the constant struggle to maintain control, both professionally and personally. Her battles with substance abuse, culminating in a DUI arrest in 2002, offered a glimpse into the pressures she faced behind the facade. The mugshot that splashed across the tabloids was a stark contrast to the polished image she had so carefully cultivated. It was a low point, a public unraveling that exposed her vulnerability to the world. Add to this the accusations of demanding behavior and the stories of strained relationships with former employees, and a picture emerges of a woman navigating immense pressure and scrutiny, often at the expense of those around her. The diva label, however unfair, became another layer of armor, a defense mechanism against a world that seemed determined to tear her down. So, what does this all mean for Diana Ross today? It means she's earned the right to protect herself, to curate her world, and to find solace in the quiet moments away from the relentless gaze of the public eye. It means that the woman who once craved the spotlight now seeks refuge in the shadows, not out of bitterness or regret, but out of a profound understanding of the price she paid for fame. While she may have retreated from the limelight, her legacy remains undeniable. She is an icon, a trailblazer, a voice that continues to inspire generations. But perhaps the most important lesson we can learn from her story is that even the brightest stars are human, capable of both extraordinary achievements and profound vulnerabilities. And that true strength lies not in denying those vulnerabilities, but in embracing them and finding the courage to carry on even when the applause fades.